Yeah, well, like I said, when you sent it to me, I had been totally unaware of it, and thought at first it bore some key markings of fake news. You know, you start to take, but then you see the video that Billy Jack Haynes posted online pertaining to this. That got me digging into more of the links. You know, is there something here, or is it just bullshit? And you know, like I just said a minute ago about doing your research, this took me several hours to dig through these links that you had sent me, and then, you know, in each link there were multiple links that were attached to each of those articles. It took me several hours to start just to begin to dig through it. But the story is that there were these two young men killed. What was it, 35 years ago? I mean, a long time ago.
It was
in Arkansas.
1987.
1987, so a good while ago, and that these murders had sort of taken on mythical proportions. I'd never heard of them before, and yet there's a story that, according to local news reports, has taken on mythical proportions in the Arkansas area. Of the murders on the railroad tracks, or the two boys murdered on the railroad, on the train tracks. It just, you know, and that sort of keeps lurking you in deeper and deeper. Billy Jack Haynes's video states that he was, after having been addicted to pain meds for quite some time, became the muscle, as he terms it, the muscle for drug entities in the area. And, you know, I want to say up front, just so everybody gets a feel for where I'm going with this, I know Billy Jack Haynes only in the sense to say hello to him, have seen him in the dressing rooms here and there. Our paths hadn't crossed that much in wrestling, but he, in watching the video of him talking about these murders, claiming that he witnessed these murders and that he had gone to local authorities and local private investigators working with the families and gave them names, substantial names. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the article it says he names lawyers and several high-ranking people. And then he talks about this criminal entity, this criminal family entity in Arkansas politics. And when you read through the article, it really sort of takes on life of its own, naming Barry Seal, who was the subject of a recent movie played by Tom Cruise. And, you know, this sort of story meanders around. But then, at first, it sounds like total bullshit. But then you sort of scratch below the surface, and you get to where he talks about, like with Barry Seal, for instance, he talks about how he was involved and knew that certain things were going on in private airfields, and how there was the interaction of a plane. There's, like I said to you in the email that I responded to, there's so much countervailing information that this would take you weeks and weeks to dig through. But in the day that I had, less than that, really 12 or 14 hours tops, to really dig through this, there are so many countervailing pieces of information that the first thing that jumped out at me is Billy Jack just repeating information that he heard from this recent movie about Barry Seal, and other things that over the years have been in the news as whether a conspiracy theory or whatever. But then you dig below that a little bit, and you keep going, and you begin to find pieces of information of the investigation about how the authorities, after the one gentleman whose name escapes me at the moment, had filed for an insurance claim on a plane that went missing, that out of Oklahoma, I believe. And the owner of the plane claimed that he was part of the Oliver North conspiracy to send arms to Central America against the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. Like I said, this gets so convoluted. Like I'm trying to dig the information out of my brain. But he files this insurance claim, is paid off on the insurance claim, and then years later, a cop or somebody in law enforcement is driving by and claims that a gust of wind blows a door open. As soon as I saw that, I thought, this sounds like Dorothy from Wizard of Oz. And claims that he saw a plane that turned out to be the missing plane that the original insurance claim was filed against. And it starts to take on all the feelings of a counterintelligence operation. When all these pieces are in place, it's such a coincidence that you have to begin to ask yourself, is this just insanity bullshit, or does Billy Jack know something more? And I will say this up front in the fairness of all the information out there, that the information I always heard in the business about Billy Jack was that Billy Jack tended to be a bullshitter. But in digging through these stories and these links, several pieces of this information begin to jump out as involving the Bushes and the Clintons, the high political powered Arkansas family. Does that make it true? No. It makes it something worth digging into and looking at and asking questions that heretofore other people may not have asked. But the links that you sent me, and I'll try to post them on Twitter and my Facebook accounts tomorrow. But and you'll see, if anybody takes the time to dig into these articles, you'll see that there's several links attached to each of these stories and each of these articles that take some time to dig through and sort of discern through. The question I came up with at the end of reading all of the articles and all the links that I clicked on was, what would Billy Jack Haynes have to gain by going public at this time? It's not like he's written a book. It's not like he's written a movie and trying to sell a movie to some studio. What would he have to gain? And what gets lost in the midst of all that is that some 30, 35 years ago, there were two young men that were murdered. And in that murder, the local investigator involved in the deaths said that they were killed by a passing train. They must have smoked some pot and fell asleep on the tracks and got killed by the train that came along. Subsequent autopsy showed that was not the case, and yet nothing more came of that. And according to the article that I read, this gentleman was later assigned a higher-up position in the government by Bill Clinton. Now, if that's the case, I didn't have time to verify and validate the information, but if that's the case, then that certainly raises enough questions that then when you look at the Billy Jack Haynes video, to ask yourself, is there something more here? And I put it this way, there was enough information in there to certainly pique my interest and warrant further investigation. Like I said to everybody, I'll post those tomorrow on my Twitter and Facebook accounts. Take your time to do your own research. And what's the key phrase that you? What's the name of the email that you sent me, Chad?
What did I call that one? I don't remember. But did I say Boys on the Tracks? Is that what I said?
Boys on the Tracks. Yeah, Billy Jack Haynes and Boys on the Tracks. And I'm sure your own links will come up, if not the same links. But
probably the same. Boys on the Tracks.
Yeah, take the time to do some research and ask yourself some questions. And as an undercurrent to all of that, don't accept what the mainstream media is offering you, what the fake news is offering you as the information. Dig into it yourself and forge your own opinions. But the information is there. And like I said, my takeaway from it was I kept coming back to what would Billy Jack Haynes have to gain by going public with his information. And I couldn't come up with an answer that would warrant him doing that if there was not some validity to it. So, again, take your time, do your own research. I would love to hear the followers and the listeners' feedback as to what their perception is of those particular links.